At its height, the Mauryan Empire stood as a global superpower, yet beneath its success lay a dark truth. The immense suffering of countless slaves in ancient India often fades into the background of historical narratives, their harsh realities overlooked. Some of them were even forced to reenact the renowned battles of the Mahabharata, not merely as performers, but as participants in genuine combat, a brutal endeavor resulting in injuries and even fatalities, all for the sole purpose of entertaining their masters. While historians tend to emphasize positive aspects, spotlighting figures like Emperor Ashoka and the diverse cultural tapestry he governed, our focus in today's video diverges. Instead of delving into the glorified accounts, we unveil unspeakable things masters did to slaves in ancient India. Welcome to Uncharted History. Prevalence of slavery. At the peak of their civilization, the major kingdoms of ancient India held an astonishing number of slaves. Conservative estimates suggest that the Mauryan Empire alone, spanning from 322 to 185 BCE, had hundreds of thousands under the yoke of servitude. But the figures alone don't reveal the whole story. These slaves weren't just a monolithic group, they were diverse in the roles they played. While a significant portion endured backbreaking work in construction sites and agricultural fields, many were roped into more specialized roles. In the sophisticated urban centers like Pataliputra, slaves could be found skillfully crafting jewelry, weaving fabrics, or even molding pottery, contributing substantially to the flourishing trade and economy. However, it's vital to understand that this distinction in roles didn't necessarily denote a hierarchy of treatment. A skilled artisan, despite his craftsmanship, could be as bound and oppressed as a manual laborer toiling under the sun. Their status as property rather than individuals was a stark contrast to the societal advancements of their time. As we peel back the layers of history, it becomes clear that while the kingdoms took pleasure in grandeur and progress, the underbelly of this society bore the weight of its successes. Stratification of slavery. Historical slavery was multifaceted, with slaves occupying diverse roles. Some were educated scholars, poets and teachers who served in royal courts, enriching the intellectual pursuits of the elite. A larger number were domestic servants, integral to their masters' daily lives, witnessing household intricacies. The majority, however, formed the labor force in fields and monumental construction projects. Tragically, those in mines and quarries endured the harshest conditions, facing peril for the luxury and prosperity of their time. Punishments and tortures. While the stratification in roles presented its own set of challenges, a shadow even darker than servitude itself was the punishments meted out to those slaves who dared defy their masters or attempt escape. The relentless nature of these penalties was both a testimony to the desperation of the oppressed and a chilling reminder of the extent to which the oppressors would go to maintain their dominion. Among the most dreaded forms of punishment was the shackling of feet, often accompanied by heavy iron balls, making movement a constant torment. Flogging was commonplace, with every lash serving as a stark message to others about the price of resistance. Some were even subjected to public humiliation, paraded through the streets, or placed in stocks as examples to dissuade any thoughts of rebellion. In a chilling comparison, the horrors these slaves faced can be likened to some of today's worst fears. Imagine being trapped in an unending loop of your most terrifying nightmare, with every waking moment a painful reminder of your powerlessness. That was the reality for these slaves, where every day was a gamble between enduring agonizing punishments or the perils of seeking freedom. Further intensifying this grim reality was the role of certain privileged slaves who were given the order of overseeing and even executing these punishments. While this gave them a semblance of authority, it also trapped them in a disturbing cycle. They were often torn between their own desire for a better position within the slave hierarchy and the guilt of inflicting pain upon their brethren. These enforcers, while appearing as oppressors, were themselves victims of the very system they helped uphold, trapped in a web where compassion was a luxury and survival necessitated cruelty. Arena and public execution. In the midst of the intense punishments and the daily struggle for existence, there existed arenas that drew eerie parallels to the Roman Colosseums. Though ancient India is often painted with a brush of mysticism and spiritual wonders, it too had its dark corners. These arenas were not just for entertainment, but also spaces where the societal hierarchy was reinforced, often at the expense of the downtrodden. Much like the gladiatorial combats of Rome, Indian arenas became stages for slaves to perform, be punished, or in the grimmest of scenarios, be executed. The very purpose of these spectacles was dual. They served as a form of entertainment for the elite and a public demonstration of power and control. One particularly chilling aspect was the reenactments of historical battles or depictions of mythological tales. Slaves would be dressed up as characters, and these enactments, far from benign theatrical plays, would often end in real injuries or death. For instance, in certain events, slaves would reenact the famed battles of the Mahabharata, where their roles were not just to act, but to engage in genuine combat. These enactments weren't mere performances. They were battles where the cost of a mistake could be one's life. These events were more than entertainment, they were power plays. Every roar of the crowd, every spilling of blood was a reinforcement of the societal order. Slaves, already at the bottom, were reduced further to mere playthings. Their pain and suffering turned into a public spectacle. The elite, on the other hand, indulged in these spectacles, drawing pleasure from the orchestrated violence of dominance. It was a manifestation of control, a message clear as day to anyone who dared challenge the status quo. Such arenas, while being centers of recreation for some, were chambers of horrors for others. They stood as a testament to the lengths human beings could go in their quest for dominance, turning pain into a performance and cruelty into a craft. Sexual exploitation. Beyond the visible scars of physical labor and public spectacles lurked a darker realm of exploitation that many slaves endured, the harrowing world of sexual slavery. In ancient India, this wasn't just a hushed whisper among the alleys, but an entrenched system that saw slaves trapped in its inescapable web. One disturbing practice that prevailed was forced breeding. To ensure a sustained and growing slave population, certain slaves were systematically chosen for reproduction. This wasn't born out of care or concern for the future of slaves, but a calculated strategy to keep the supply chain steady, ensuring that the powerful had ample workforce for their farms, mines, and crucially, their pleasure quarters. Speaking of pleasure quarters, the tales from these spaces are gut-wrenching. Many ancient cities had dedicated areas, much like the red light districts of today, where pleasure was a commodity and slaves were the unwilling providers. These quarters, often veiled under the guise of entertainment hubs, were essentially brothels where slaves, both male and female, were forced into providing sexual services. While some historical texts romanticize these zones as places of art, music, and dance, the reality for many was a lifetime of sexual subjugation. Take the ancient city of Varanasi, for instance. Amid its spiritual reputation, there existed streets where the groans of pleasure and pain intermingled. Slaves there were branded, sometimes with the insignias of their owners or the establishments they belonged to, an indelible mark of their servitude. This wasn't just a practice restricted to one city, but echoed in various urban hubs across the subcontinent. This exploitation wasn't just about physical dominance, it was a psychological chain too. Slaves were often stripped of their identities, given new names, and sometimes even forced to forget their pasts. This ensured not just their physical, but also their emotional and mental allegiance to their masters and madams. In addressing sexual exploitation, it's essential to recognize that this wasn't just a random act of cruelty by a few, but a structured system that thrived and was tragically considered normal. Slave revolts. Even under the stifling weight of subjugation, slaves in ancient India mustered the courage to challenge the chains that bound them. These were not mere occasional outbursts, but organized uprisings that symbolized their indomitable will. One notable revolt was led by a slave named Siddhartha. Once a skilled artisan, he'd witnessed firsthand the brutalities inflicted upon his peers. With a burning desire to shatter the chains, Siddhartha rallied a significant number of slaves from various provinces. They strategized, planned ambushes, and used guerrilla tactics, taking the oppressors by surprise. The uprising, which lasted for months, sent tremors through the elite corridors of power. However, like many revolts, the aftermath was a double-edged sword. While some rulers realized the importance of better treatment and reduced the cruelties, others retaliated with increased vigor, fortifying their defenses and intensifying punishments. Yet, the tales of these revolts are not just stories of despair, but also beacons of hope. Each uprising, whether quelled or triumphant, chipped away at the monumental edifice of oppression. Leaders like Sudasa and many unnamed heroes didn't just fight for freedom, they instilled the idea that no matter how dire the circumstances, the spirit of resistance could never be entirely extinguished. The stories of slaves in ancient India reveal both pain and perseverance. As we delve into these chapters of history, it challenges us to think, how many more hidden tales are waiting to be discovered? This is History Uncharted. See you next time.